Welcome back to Metal Heroes Review, episode number 119. We're here reviewing the last 3 episodes of Mobile Cop Jiban. Yes! I finished watching this. Took a while, but done. So, we're here discussing episodes 50 to 52. So, in the case of 50, pretty much basically they're still trying to find Jiban's base. So, we actually return Mr. Yagasa. He's the guy in charge of the Jiban project at Metro Police. So, his office is broken into and they steal the Jiban file. Which, this is the episode where they find out that Jiban is Naito. And there's a lot of plot revelations in this one. Okay, the bad guys find out his real name. And Naito finds out that Miami, who's been missing, though occasionally found but not actually back with him, since episode 18 of the series, turns out that she's now, basically it's revealed in this episode that Naito had a sister, an actual sister, who disappeared 10 years prior to the events of this series. So they mention he's 22 in this episode, so that means she disappeared when he was 12. And she was still a baby. So he does mention that they went on some trip, and the parent and sister never returned. He never found out exactly what happened. That wasn't until basically it was found out in the file, where apparently Biolin captured them, and supposedly parents were killed with experimentation. As for Naomi, why she survived, it's not really very clear. She was basically Igasi and the professor. They found her in an abandoned warehouse, which supposedly they thought this was a bio lab, but turned to place was abandoned. But they find her there. Why in the world why was this baby left there? This toddler, not very known exactly why that. So basically, it's revealed that Miami's parents, who debuted back in episode 1, turns out, well, yes, these two are in fact the son and daughter-in-law of the professor, but Miami is not his biological granddaughter. No. It turns out he had them adopt her to be basically their daughter and their protector. And Gus knew all along about the fact that, mainly because he found out that Naito was secretly looking for finding out what happened to his sister. And he finds on this episode, Harry Boy had no idea about this. None. He's completely blown away by this, as Naito is. So, then of course he's brought out to a quarry, because they love him fights in quarries, because Toei loves to fight it because it's super cheap to film there. And plus they can do explosions without destroying public property. So, then he gets there and it looks up like he comes as Jiban, so he's going to Naito. I don't know if there's an error there. He looks up like, why is there Jiban? That's clearly not him. He scans, oh, it's Matt Garbo. And then eventually, of course, they find out, and eventually, thanks to her being remodeled, and she's able to summon all 3 vehicles out here to attack Jiban. But lucky enough, basically, that Jiban was able to figure out a way to override her. Actually, it was due to Miami, where she basically was yelling out Jiban's name, and somehow there was energy sent to Matt Garbo, which turned her back into her normal self, and then Jiban basically just, sort of lights the smoke on her, she gets away, and of course, everybody's right back normal. And then the very next episode, he needs to figure out a way to sort of abandon his Naito identity by going into hiding. First, basically hiding the base, because if they send out the executive signal, they'll find where the base is. So he goes in hiding, and presumably some time passes by. It's not exactly very clear how much time passes by. You could say weeks per se, but they're not very clear about it. And then, of course, basically, Dr. Giba used the opportunity to conquer Japan. Yep. Used the opportunity to conquer the country. Like attacking basically Metro PD, to find out the bases, and so with all this crazy stuff happening here, they actually do find the base because they use the executive signal. Because the thing is, them sending signals actually a ploy in order to find out what supposes their base is. And they write it down, and they send information to Jiban, who actually is meditating out in the countryside, and he's brought back in, and the missile is fired, and the base is pretty much in ruins. But lucky enough, before this happened, they actually had the ingenious idea of having 3 vehicles evacuate. Good job for that. And Nagasa and Halibor are killed in this particular thing, so they're gone. So Jiban proceeds to go to supposedly the base of Biola. Yeah, he goes to their base. He basically goes there in one of the vehicles, and he proceeds to walk there. He just blasts his way right through and finds him face-to-face Matt Garbo and proceeds to have a long fight. And, well, first he proceeds to knock off 2 of the new weapons, and then, of course, he uses the Max sword to proceed to stab her and slice her up, and then, of course, completely out of the blue, summons the gun, despite, and, of course, they have the weapons in the arm, despite she knocked them off, and then he proceeds to blow her, and then proceeds to kill her. Yep, ending her threat once and for all. She's been, and of course, at one point I think she was dead, and then she came back up. Then he fired, basically, and yeah. Of course, she's been there since episode 17 of the series. Not missed a single episode. So Marsha and Kesha proceed to run back to their boss, which, of course, that's when Jiban shows up. And he just happens to meet Dr. Giba in his actual strategy room. Now, in the case of Jiraiya, this couldn't happen because it was open area. Now, but what about the previous series from the heroes? This happened for a lot of them. Yes, it happened for Gavin, the finale. Pretty much a lot of time, usually in the finale-ish, this happened where they go to the main strategy room. This happened in pretty much all of them except for Jiraiya. That's the only one this did not happen with. Which is interesting, the fact that it's like that. Well, actually, except for 2. There are 2 places, 2 series where we never actually went to the base in the finale. That being Jaspion and Jiraiya. And the reason for it? Because they had no base. At all. This one's the first one since Metalder to do this, because Jiraiya didn't have one, because for some reason Demon Clan operated in an open base. They were never inside. They basically just operated wherever the heck they wanted to. In the case of Jaspion, half the time they operated in a cave, whatever. But that's kind of that series. So, he's face to face with Dr. Giba for the first time. And Dr. Giba proceeds to kill his 2 assistants who've been there since the opening episode. They're killed because they fled from Jiban. He's like, really? Of course, the whole thing, oh yeah, I'm a demon, I don't like love. And then he transforms into his true self, Giboid. And then he reveals his backstory of how the heck, where the heck he came from. Unlike some villains, they don't really explain where the heck they came from. This one, so I'm presuming this is over 10 years part of the series, because apparently the professor is the one who helped create Jiban. So he was created from toxic waste from the National Science Academy. I'm like, since when does the school basically have access to toxic waste? It's weird. Of course, this was the 70s. If this was Middle Hero series, this was before even Gavin showed up in the franchise. Yes. So, then he just walks up, and Professor sees him, and then later that leads to the whole thing experiment, and he apparently grew to resent humanity. Now, as for why in the world... Now, this is kind of weird when they show his true form, because they show him partially transfer part of this with the head and the antenna, which that actually is there for the monster form, but not the head thing. The head's different, per se. Also, why in the world he assumed that particular form? That's one question mark I have. Why that form? Which, of course, he never explains that. And then he and Jiban proceed to fight, and Jiban's losing, and all of a sudden here comes his car, which Jiban destroys, and then his motorcycle shows up, and then that gets destroyed too. I'm like, wow. Loses base 51, and 51, and then 52 loses his car, his motorcycle, and then he takes Naomi to his own airship, which of course basically that Spyless basically who's there gives him a lift up there, and then he hops off on the thing, and then of course to add insult to injury, Dr. Gibble destroys Spyless, basically destroying all of Gibbon's vehicles. He goes inside, and of course, he is demon with love. And then he proceeds to stab Gibbon with actually his sword and frees Miami. And then they drop, and by the way, Yoko, who briefly, for some weird reason, they had the mask, the grunts of the series, just occupied the entrance to Central Police Station, which, how the heck they got there, I'm sure they probably drove there. Why they picked there, I'm not sure. So, they break through, and Yoko basically meets up with Jiban. And then, of course, basically, he was jealous because he flies up, bows up, and then basically, I'm presuming got his sword back, because he comes back down the ground. How he survived is not very clear, because Dr. Gibb was dead. He was destroyed, he was killed in the explosion of his ship, because, well, there's no follow-up to this at all. I mean, Toei has never done a follow-up to Jiban since the series wrapped up, which, by the way, was 36 years ago. There's no follow-up to it, so if basically somehow he did survive that crash, which, given the fact he was made of goo, I am presuming he probably did not. If somehow he did, that would be surprising. So then, of course, by the way, Maya refers to him as Big Brother, which surprises her, and then she finds out, Jiban is actually Naito. Yeah, she figures it out in her last scene in the series. But what happens to Miami? Well, she's returned to her parents, and Naito proceeds to go on a journey to fight the evil organizations and maybe kill before she grows up. Also, she's got pigtails now, Miami. Yeah. Her parents, great to see them again. They have not been seen since episode 18 in the series. And, well, he goes off, and I'm like, okay, so he has no base. He has no vehicles. His gun was presumably destroyed unless it got fixed. So, unless somehow the base was repaired. Oh, by the way, he does take 3 sets of bouquets to a graveyard. First being the professor who basically built the robotics body. And he gives the next 2 to Halle Boy, and also to the guy who charged the cop, who was sort of the commissioner of the Metro Police Department. Gave one to him too, which I was quite nice of him to do. Then he goes off on his journey, which I'm like, what resources he had to fight other organizations? Now, this ending seems very similar to the ending of Kamen Rider Black RX, where he just goes on a journey across the world to fight evil organizations, because there's evil out there. BioLite was not the only one. So, my guess is they took inspiration from RX for this, presumably. But it is a very nice ending. I do enjoy it. But that's pretty much the Mobile Cop Jiban in a nutshell. Final thoughts on this series. I actually kind of enjoyed it. I didn't think any episode was bad per se. It's just that the only criticism I have for the series, I mean, there's some minor criticism, but the big criticism I have is the episode. I'm the firm belief that 36, 39 were aired out of order. Yes, it's like these episodes were put out of order for a reason. But after that, everything seems pretty much fine. Yeah, I thought that was. So. Okay, so. I do have some small problems with the series. So the whole thing with Mayumi missing and her having amnesia. Half the time I think that series remembered that she existed. Every time they just completely forgot she was there. I get probably the reason why they couldn't use her after a while, because she's a child actress and she probably had to go to school. I'm like, okay. So they probably gave her a rest. Probably because either she was getting too scared or something. I'm not really sure. But in case you're curious, though, do any of these characters ever return after the series wraps up? Jiban, kind of, in the second Super Attention movie. I say kind of as a key, similar to the keys that the Rangers use, the Gokaiders use in Gokaider, the Synth keys. Yeah, it was brief, great weapon. That was it. But do the characters return after this? Oh, heck no. None of them do. So, the only Metal Heroes who debuted in the 80s who actually return in modern day were Gavin, Shirvan, and Jiraiya. That's it. You could see also basically ones from the 90s, but the ones debuted in the 80s, those three are the only ones that returned. Of course, Gavin returned first in the series of movies. He appeared in like several of them. Shirvan appeared in like one. And of course, Jiraiya popped up in a series I'll talk about next anyways. But Jiban? Nope. Never did. Though this does start up basically a trend of cop dramas when it comes to Metal Heroes. Excuse me. The very next series they aired after this was Winspector. Yep, that was next one to air, but that's not the next one I'm going to watch next. It's going to be, well, Jam Person. But I'm going back to Super Sentai next, which will probably get a chance to do that tomorrow. And I have to basically make an announcement for that one, is that the original plan was to do Boom Boom Onger. But I decided to switch to Ninjanger instead. But I'll explain the reason for that tomorrow. Okay? So please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.